backyard, Beast from the East, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I'm Vasyl Khan, joined by John Rawling. We're here at the weigh-in for Roberto Garcia versus Martin Murray. Due to a delay, we're going to kill some time and speak to John Rawling about the show we've got here on July the 28th. Eddie Hearn Promotions with Matchroom. Big fight in the heavyweight division announced. Whyte, Joseph Parker. What's your thoughts on that fight?
Good fight, isn't it? You know, if I was making the odds on that, I'd make it pretty close. Both of them beaten by AJ. I mean, on paper, you'd say Joseph Parker maybe has fought at slightly the higher level, and obviously he's gone the distance with AJ. And technically, you might say he's the superior guy. But I've got a lot of time for Dillian. I think he's improved. I think he's working well. He's learnt about pacing himself better than he was maybe a couple of years ago, and I think it's going to take a lot to beat him. I think he's got a great chance of beating Joseph Parker, and if he does so, then of course he's right into the mix, isn't he? Well, he is already, but he certainly underlines the fact that he's worth another world title shot.
Do you expect the winner of this fight to be challenging for a world title in their next fight?
Yes, I do. I think that could very definitely happen. Dillian will call out Deontay Wilder, I'm sure, but it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they wind up fighting AJ again, whoever wins this.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Wilder Joshua fight should happen, but it's still not signed. And until it's signed, then you have to obviously say, well, there are alternatives, and the winner of this one against AJ would be a decent, marketable alternative.
Do you think the defeat to Anthony Joshua in 2015 was probably a good thing for Dillian Whyte? Because as you said, you know, he's doing very well lately. A lot of people would have been expecting him to challenge for a world title now, but he's come off the back of some very good wins, especially against Chisora, and you know, he's actually at a point now where he should be challenging for a world title, don't you think?
Well, he's a hard guy, isn't he? He's a street boy. He's a tough man, but I think importantly, he's learnt more about himself as an athlete and as a fighter. He's not just going out there trying to intimidate people and trying to tear people's head off now. He's now realised, and I think he's had it instilled in him, that there's an awful lot more to boxing than just that. And he's looking at it more athletically now, and he's working behind his jab, and he looks a much better fighter. He's never going to be Sugar Ray Leonard. Let's not kid ourselves that he's suddenly going to go out there and box like Muhammad Ali. But he's a much better fighter than he was, and he's a tough kid. He's very strong, and he's going to take a lot of beating. Joseph Parker against him is a really good fight.
Do you think Dillian Whyte's performance against Lucas Browne was his best performance of his career so far?
He was very good, wasn't he? I picked up a lot of social media afterwards saying Lucas Browne this, Lucas Browne that, and he wasn't, you know, he looked old and it showed nothing. But you know, I mean, Lucas Browne's always fought like that, hasn't he? He's never been somebody who's gone into the ring looking like an Adonis, and he's never been somebody who's been high work rate. You know, he's a big puncher, and he's a rough fighter. So bearing that in mind, you can only beat what's in front of you, and Dillian Whyte did a good job.
Another big heavyweight fight announced on that card is Derek Chisora versus Carlos Takam. Carlos Takam, you know, won the hearts of many people when he fought Anthony Joshua last year in Cardiff, and a lot of people will say that this is like literally a last chance saloon for Derek Chisora if he loses. What's your thoughts on that fight, and what's your predictions for that fight?
Depends which Derek turns up, doesn't it? If it's the Derek Chisora who fought Dillian Whyte, then I think he's got a great chance to beat him, because he'll be bigger than Takam, and I think people are looking charitably at Takam on the back of that performance against Anthony Joshua, and if AJ was here now, he'd say that was not my finest night.
And he pushed Joseph Parker all the way, didn't he, Carlos Takam?
Yeah, he's a tough guy, but again, on paper, you'd say that's a very good fight. I would lean if he can really be up for it. I would lean slightly towards Derek, which might surprise you, but I just think if Derek has still got one real fight in him, if the hunger is still there, and if he can get himself into real shape, he might just outgame him.
If Chisora loses, do you think it's time to call it a day, because he's lost 8 fights in his career already?
Maybe, I don't know. I'd never tell anybody to call it a day. It's not for me to say. You know, that's his call. But you know, he was it was nip and tuck, wasn't it, against Dillian Whyte? A
Yeah.
lot of people thought that Derek won that fight. So on the basis of that, you'd say it's not ready for him to call it a day yet.
I want to get your thoughts on his fight in Monaco against Ajit Kabayel for the European title. That's another good and up-and-coming fighter, especially being European champion. But what have you made of Ajit Kabayel, and do you think he's a force to be reckoned with, and do you think he's someone that can challenge this heavyweight division?
Not somebody I've watched enough to really be able to make a sensible comment.
Yeah. Another fight on that night is going to be Kell Brook versus Brandon Cook, potentially a world title eliminator. Brandon Cook, what's he going to offer Kell Brook on the night?
Well, it's more a question of what Kell Brook's going to offer. How much he's got left. He's had those 2 bad defeats against Spence and against Golovkin, and there's still big fights out there for Kell, but there's still just a question about how much he's got left. I hope he goes out there and looks $1 million, because I like Kell and I think he's an exciting fighter at his best. But you know, those 2 defeats,
Yeah.
they've got to have taken something out of him, a lot out of him. And his last fight, you know, it was against a guy who was handpicked maybe to make him look good, and he did look good. But how much he's really got left, if he gets pushed into a position of adversity, you know, we'll see.
There's obviously a lot of talk about him potentially fighting Amir Khan. Before we obviously move on to that, there's people are saying that Kell Brook should stay at welterweight, should stay at middleweight. Judging by his performances over the last few years, you mentioned big losses to the welterweight champion of the world and the middleweight champion of the world. What weight do you think Kell Brook is best off staying at?
I think 11 stone's his weight. You know, he's not big enough to fight at middleweight, and he clearly finds it very, very tough to make 10-7 nowadays. I think 11 stone's his weight.
The Amir Khan fight is a fight everyone's been talking about for years. Amir Khan is due to fight as well sometime maybe in August or early September. If both of them can come out on top, do you think Eddie Hearn's going to get that fight to happen towards the end of 2018?
Yeah, it's got to, hasn't it? I mean, both of them are coming towards, well, not exactly the twilight of their career,
Yeah.
but they've been around a while. The fights arguably should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. But I think it's a given now that it will happen, and I think it makes economic sense for both of them. Who wins, who knows, but there'll be plenty who'll want to buy the ticket.
There's obviously a lot of talk about Vasyl Lomachenko, especially after that tremendous performance he put in against Jorge Linares. You know, freeweight world champion in just 12 fights. How exciting is a fighter like Vasyl Lomachenko, especially at the age of 31 and already a freeweight world champion?
Well, there are good judges out there saying that he deserves to be ranked among the best of all time. I think you need to have really great fights to be regarded as a great fighter. In my opinion, he's got a way to go before he gets to that sort of level. I want to see him really pressed and being in great fights. But where the great fights are for him, I'm not quite sure. He's clearly very, very technically gifted. He's had a fabulous amateur career, and he's done what's been asked of him.
397 fights,
Yeah,
Olympic gold medal,
amazing amateur
junior
career.
weight champion.
And he's doing everything that's asked of him at the moment. He's clearly a rare talent, but
Yeah.
whether or not he's reached the stage yet where he walks down Regent Street and say, look, hey, there's Vasyl Lomachenko, I don't think so. You know, and he needs big, marketable fights, and I hope for his sake, as a clearly very talented fighter, I hope he gets them.
What did you make of that performance against Jorge Linares, especially the fact that he had to come up from the canvas? A lot of people were really doubting him going into that fight, saying Jorge Linares would have too much for him, and it actually turned out to be the other way on the night.
Yeah, it was exceptional, wasn't it? It was. I saw somebody refer to it as boxing porn. You know, as a boxing fan, it was everything you wanted to see, wasn't it? And it did tell you something about Lomachenko. It showed that he's more than just a fancy Dan. If ever anybody thought that, you know, he got tagged, and he got tagged heavily, and he came back. Showed a fighting man's resolve, and for any fighter, any top fighter, that's what you want to see. He's special. He is special.
Do you think Maurice Hooker would be an ideal fight for Lomachenko?
I think he beats Hooker easily. I think he's much too much the complete fighter for Hooker. I think Hooker is, you know, he's got a decent right hand. He's long. He's got long levers, but you know, I mean, he's got too many weaknesses for Lomachenko, and Lomachenko would exploit them. He's got much too much for him, I think.
Obviously, you were commentating that night at the MEN Arena when Hooker took on Flanagan. It was a very close fight. Maurice Hooker got the decision in the end. What did you make of the performance and the decision of both fighters?
I think the decision was probably just about right. I mean, during the commentary, I think I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see it going narrowly to Flanagan. And really, I was just playing devil's advocate because I thought there could well be a split decision, which is the way it turned out to be. But I think probably if you talk to Terry, he'd probably know. I think Maurice just had a bit too much for him, the right hand and fighting at distance, and somehow Terry was never quite able to find the speed of footwork that he had maybe a couple of years ago, and whether he's going to get that back, time will tell. But it was a good, solid, workmanlike performance from Hooker, and he and his camp fancied it massively when they got over here.
Very confident at the undercard press conference.
They couldn't believe
they popped with a lot of stick from the Manchester fans as well, didn't they, throughout the week?
Couldn't believe that they were being quoted at something like 5 or 6 to 1 against, and I think they had some fairly significant bets on their man, and fair play to them, good luck. But there's a difference, and with the greatest of respect to Terry Flanagan and indeed to Maurice Hooker, that's that level. I think Lomachenko is maybe a level higher than that, and if he does go in against him, I can only see one winner.
What next for Terry Flanagan?
Well, I don't know. That's he's in the mix. He's only got the one defeat in 34 fights. He's a hard man. He's a proud man, and I think he'll come back, and they'll probably find him another major title shot. I hope he can get it back, because for somebody who's been at the top as long as he has, you want to see somebody get the big fights and get the rewards. And I'd like to see Terry get another big shot.
Just touching on finally, obviously we spoke a bit about Billy Joe Saunders the other day. Final thoughts on tomorrow night's main event, Roberto Garcia, Martin Murray, and does the winner wait for Billy Joe Saunders, or do you think Billy Joe Saunders will look elsewhere?
Well, the winner's got a shot, hasn't he? And they're talking about the winner possibly being put into a mandatory position for whoever wins Canelo and Golovkin, so that's a possibility. Billy Joe Saunders also a possibility, although there are whispers about Billy Joe and James DeGale.
Yes. What's your take on that? Would that
good fight?
But would Billy Joe Saunders have to move up to super middleweight, or do you think James DeGale would have to come down to middleweight?
No, I think he'd go up.
Yeah.
I think he'd go up. I think that's the obvious way.
Just your final question. A lot of people are saying that Billy Joe Saunders should be stripped of his world title due to the fact he's been inactive since last December after beating David Lemieux. Your thoughts on that? Do you think he should be stripped of the world title, or just wait till he's back from injury to defend the title?
I want to see him back in there to defend it. I don't like to see anybody stripped of a world title. I'd like to see Billy Joe in there in big fights and keeping his title. It's a money-making game. It's all about getting the biggest and most lucrative fights, and I hope Billy's in them. You want to see him keep him busy, and it'd be lovely to see him back in the ring in the next couple of months.
John, well, listen, I think I've taken up enough of your time as it is. We'll let you carry on. Hope you enjoyed the weather. Hope you enjoyed tomorrow night, and hopefully this weigh-in gets underway shortly.
No problem.
Thank you for talking to Lights Out.
Okay, no problem.